want to help these doctors because they have so much passion for patients, and patients don't see it. I met tens and thousands of doctors, all different spheres.
What are some of the things that doctors get wrong when it comes to running their business?
There were a lot of doctors who were very smart and who knew their subject matter very well. But when it came to the non-biology part, the non-science part, which kind of went into the management and went into this thing, that's where, they would find it very challenging. Unfortunately for doctors, it's their time, which is the most valuable, precious commodity.
Correct.
When it comes to healthcare, trust is more important, right? And so that's why, two factors. One, build products and services that encapsulate this trust. B, factor in the time it will take. It will take decades.
Yeah.
But then the good news is that those are also moats. And that's how even brands in healthcare work. A Dettol is a 150-year-old brand. Through data, we can for the first time show much better health outcomes. We built India's first, and even sometimes I think it's also the world's first online software for doctors, right? We were online in 2008, so we built SaaS in 2008.
Wow.
And then in 2012, we built the first doctor discovery platform, right? A few years later, we built the first mobile app. What this innovation can do for healthcare is phenomenal.
This is a very special Doctor's Day episode of the Create Wealth podcast. In this episode, I'm hosting Shashank ND, who's co-founder and CEO of Practo and the CII chair for digital health in India. We talk about what it takes to run a successful medical practice, how doctors are adopting to technology and specifically to data science and artificial intelligence. We also cover Shashank's own unique journey, that of starting Practo as a young college student and taking it to becoming India's only profitable health tech startup. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. I'm Sandeep Jethwani, the host of the Create Wealth podcast and co-founder of Deserve. Shashank, you were telling me earlier today that you've interacted with 12,000 doctors in the journey of setting up and building Practo. Now, one of the most interesting things is a lot of doctors are also entrepreneurs in many ways. They've set up their own business, hired a team, running a system. What are some of the things that the best doctors have done really well?
So, it so happened that I met these many number of doctors. But just to give you a little bit of backstory on how it all started, I was in my third year of engineering, and I was trying to figure out, which space do I build a product. This is back in 2007. And I met a bunch of people. And I met this one, I met lawyers, I met people from very diverse background. And then I met this one doctor in Bangalore. I remember, vividly because it was afternoon time. He's in between patients, and I go meet him, telling him that, hey, I have this product I want to talk to you about. And I could see even in that afternoon, he was sitting all alone by himself in this clinic of his. But the passion he had for his patients really inspired me. He was planning for what to do for the next patient. He was excited about what he had done for his previous patient. And he was so worried about this patient that happened a few days before that. And he was explaining all of these things to me. And it was a lunchtime.
Yeah.
So I got a really 1 or 2 hours with him. And I could see the passion that he had for patients. And a similar thing happened to me just a few days later with another doctor. This was in Shivaji Nagar. The first doctor was in a part of Bangalore called Malleshwaram. And in the Shivaji Nagar doctor, right, it's a slightly more crowded space. He has a slightly more tinier setup. But just the sheer passion for his patients and how meticulously he was trying to improve their health was really kind of inspired me. And I said, hey, I want to help these guys, right? Yeah. And I want to help these doctors because they have so much passion for patients, and patients don't see it.
Yeah.
Because you go meet them, you have this kind of a slightly more transactional relationship. We have a 15-minute conversation, or let's say you have
one hour conversation. You are worried about your own health at that time.
Yeah, you're anxious about your own health, right? So it's all about you.
Yeah.
But what you don't see behind the scenes is the sheer passion that doctors have for patients. And I saw that up front. And I got really inspired by them. And I said, okay, what do I build that will enhance their, productivity? Sure. And that's how the software came to me. And that's how I ended up, going on to meet 12,000 of them or more, actually. I know that's just the back of the hand calculation. But in my last 16 years, I met tens and thousands of doctors, all different spheres. I met beginners. I met doctors who have done 40 years plus. I've met physicians, I've met surgeons, I've met doctors in India, outside India, across. And a couple of things that come through is that there are all doctors. One thing that's common is that they have sheer insane levels of passion for their patients. And genuinely, that is one of the reasons why they pick medicine, I guess, and that's why they are kind of self-select themselves into that cohort. And it's a sheer pleasure to be with them, because their genuine care that they have for patient is something very motivating and inspiring. And even it doesn't matter which level you are. It doesn't matter if you're owner of a 5-story 500-bed hospital, or whether you're a single doctor getting into practice. So that was something that's common. But something that I felt what differentiated doctors between two was, I think there were a lot of doctors who were very smart and who knew their subject matter very well. But when it came to the non-biology part, the non-science part, which kind of went into the management and went into this thing, that's where they would find it very challenging, because it's similar to how I'm more math and computer science, and I find biology more challenging. So it's the reverse. So
sure. And
the good guys I found kind of teamed up.
Yeah.
They found ways to team up with others who had those strengths.
Okay.
The second thing that I saw was that there was the doctors who succeeded a lot. I saw a sense of ability to doctors genuinely with patients. I would not call it a God complex, but they are God to patients.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So they are at all time having a very different kind of a mindset when dealing with patients. Now, how do you marry that with a beginner's mindset is a challenge that a lot of doctors, don't very easily move into. So, as businessmen and as any professional in any sphere, having a beginner's mindset is very important. It doesn't matter whether you're a beginner, whether you're you're 5 years in, 10 years, there's always more to learn.
Yes.
Right.
That curiosity is required, and
exactly
willingness to learn.
Yeah. You need to have that humbleness to know that you don't know enough.
Yeah.
Now, how do you marry that to a doctor? It's a very interesting thing, right? Because as a doctor, at the receiving end of being thanked each day for saving so many lives or for contributing to so many people's betterment.
Sure.
Now, how do you marry that to a beginner's mindset?
Yeah.
It's a challenging one. You need to be at both. You need to have that confidence to treat patients, at the same time have the beginner's mindset to be ready to learn, even from somebody younger, even from somebody outside your field, even from somebody else.
Yeah.
So that is the challenge I've seen a lot of doctors face, and the ones that have really always kept a beginner's mindset, right from college to starting their practice to going on, and having that humbleness to learn, balancing out there is what I've seen play out well for them.
I think you describe it really well, Shashank. I think it seems like on one hand, you've got to be really confident about dealing with a patient. But at the same time, when it comes to the economics of your business, you need to be willing to learn a lot of new things, or probably even on the technology side, be willing to sort of adapt and grow over a period. You've looked at a lot of doctors up close, looked at their economics of their business very closely. What are some of the things that doctors get wrong when it comes to running their business?
Now, I think first of all, you'll be surprised when we started working in this field. I was very surprised that doctors maintain very little, have very little knowledge of the economics. They, in fact, maintain very little data. That's the first unfortunate part, right? It is, I think there's also a challenge in time. There's a challenge in learning management. So because of that, they have to end up doing everything.
Sure.
And they don't have enough time allocated to understanding their business. Like in a business, when you grow, the time you spend doing the day-to-day activities reduces, because you are able to get other people, and then you get more time to analyze data and see what you're getting right and what you're getting wrong.
Sure.
Unfortunately for doctors, it's their time which is the most valuable, precious commodity.
Correct.
And so they are really not able to step back. If you look at the best surgeons today, they even today would be spending those many number of hours in OT because that's what's required of them. So I don't know if there's a solution to it, but maybe there are tools or products that they can use to do this, or they can hire better people. Is how do you get data? That data orientation is something that I don't think doctors are really equipped with. And without understanding data, you can't understand patterns, you can't understand insights about your business.
Sure.
And the lack of data itself leads to lack of insights.
Right.
And lack of very basic insights. What's my profit margin? What is my, they have a sense of how it's doing because they have an overall number, but the breakup of that, what is giving me ROI, what is not giving me ROI? ROI is return of investment. Right?
Yes.
How do they break all this up and understand this and then focus on things that is helping them for the things that are not helping them? They go by intuition a lot, right? Because that's how they treat patients. They treat them based on their experience. And now running a business, you need to marry that intuition with the data.
Sure.
And that lack of data, I feel, is one of their weakest points.
Right.
So they don't get deep into their data, understand which procedures have what kind of margins. They go by gross numbers. They don't go into the details and understand, okay, even though I'm earning so much from this procedure, if I take out all the costs, what am I actually left with?
Yeah.
And how much time am I spending on that procedure? And is it really my skill set or not? Which are the treatments for which I am really good at? Just because, taking an example, just because I'm an orthopedic doctor, am I good at all things orthopedic or am I good at a few things orthopedic? Should I specialize? Those are the things that, get missed out. And so because of this lack of data, that impedes their growth, in my opinion. That's one thing that I would think that, is thing that I think that gets missed out. Apart from this, the second thing I is that there is a sense among doctors that it's only the seniors that they learn from, but growth and learning is everywhere, right? It's in every books. It's in books. It's in their field and other fields. I feel like them stepping out of their core comfort zone of biology is not really there. They love to go deeper and deeper in their field. They do CME programs, but in adjacent areas, they don't. And the ones who do kind of benefit.
And by adjacent, do you mean in the medical domain or in the commercial side of things?
I would say that, commercial, technology, it could be, commercial, we mean, business.
Yeah.
It could be marketing. It could be, it could be how to understand consumers. It could be empathy. It could be, there are so many different aspects that you need as a doctor. The biology part is an important one. It's the core competence. But that's not just enough. Like, I mean, if you are probably phenomenal at finance and that's why you've picked up the fintech space. But then to run a business, you need to know so many other domains.
Sure.
You need to be, maybe not phenomenal at, but at least good at.
Yeah.
And so those are the areas where I feel that they miss out on. And I've not seen enough doctors taking the initiative to learn and equip themselves with that. I'll give you a small data point. We did an analysis of patients who did not recover, right? Because we have so many patients who come to us. So we're able to send them a request after a few months of treatment and say, hey, you met this doctor so many months back. Let's look at, did you recover, did you not recover, right? And if you did not recover, what are the reasons? And if you recovered, how are you doing now?
Yeah.
And also, did you end up going to some other doctor because, for some other reason you didn't recover? Neither of the two buckets.
Therefore, you went to somebody else.
There's a third bucket. The data was quite surprising. The data was surprising to the tunes that, there were a lot of patients because they couldn't understand the doctor. Just because of that reason, they went to somebody else. The treatment was right.
Perfectly fine.
But then there was some level of connect that did not have the doctor. The trust they did not build with the doctor. The doctor spoke too fast. The doctor gave me too short time period. He didn't answer all my questions. He spoke a little rudely. He didn't, I don't know, those human signs, right? Of saying, how do you communicate a right thing in the right way? That was not there. So I went and met another doctor. That's, almost another, like a good percentage of consumers. And the other consumers who did not recover did not follow the instructions right. The treatment was right, but they just didn't follow the instructions right. And all this data put together, we're publishing a paper very soon. We found that almost 8 to 10% of the patients didn't even, were in the bucket of not recovered, right? And so when we go deeper into this bucket, we realize that it's very little of actual treatment, but it's a lot of the non-treatment part, which in communication, in conversation gets missed out,
right?
Because of which they don't recover or, they go somewhere else. So out of the, 8 to 10% that did not recover, there was just about 2 to 3% where the treatment could have been, maybe a little different, maybe And that also, and the remaining 7 to 8%, that 70 to 80% were more non-biology oriented things that could have been explained better to the patient or dealt with the patient better. And even in the treatment portion, it wasn't the knowledge being a problem.
Yeah.
It was more about did not take enough medical history.
Yeah.
If the doctor had taken enough questions, or the treatment could have been slightly more customized or personalized, which would have been more effective. So those are the things that where the doctors could clearly add on to. Now, again, this is nitpicking, right? Because I want to definitely put the disclaimer that, they do probably the biggest service and profession. Now, I'm just trying to put out data that will help, take that 92% to 100%, which is what they want to do.
Correct.
And that's what I wanted to partner with them for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you said it very interestingly that it's the human side of things, because you're so passionate about your craft, the job that you do, that sometimes these ancillary things which actually are the last mile of closure, right? So the experience that the customer gets or the patient gets when they walk into the clinic, I think is one of the most important things, right? I've seen this up close, that you'll go to a clinic where you feel that overall everything feels good, right? There are so many times when the doctor or their assistant calls and checks in on you 1 day, 2 days, 3 days later. And then you by default will go back to that doctor because you feel cared for, right? And the treatment might be exactly the same between somebody who does that and somebody who doesn't. But the economic outcomes might be so much better for the guy who does it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, we should see how difficult this job is, right? Imagine you have to be on the front line all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't even imagine. And even if, even if they have a bad, let's say, there's some bad news or there's some bad outcomes, it affects your mindset.
Sure.
It passes on to the next patient. There's so many things that goes into them, and I'm sure I'm not one. So I can tell you for one that I'm only speaking of data.
Yeah.
I'm sure the experience would be very
I know
difficult.
sitting here in a recording studio is very easy for us to say this, but when they are actually living it on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, patient-to-patient situation, it's very difficult. How do you think doctors can solve this challenge? Is there through tooling? Is that through getting a commercial person into their organization? How have some of the guys who've done it well addressed it?
Yeah, see, I mean, any problem has 3 components: system, process, people, right? And so this also requires that. It requires all 3. You need, I would say people is the last. I think you need a system that collects data. That system could be any system that collects data. So you should trust in data. That data should lead to processes that you fix in your, it could be clinic, hospital, it could be in your practice. And then you have people who oversee those processes if required, right? So it flows in this way. So, I think being guided by data is being the most important, and the collection of data is the most important. And I've seen that, what I just mentioned to you is all data that we collected from thousands and thousands of patients. We were the first ones 10 years back who started taking feedback about patient stories from patients after their treatment and started sharing that with the doctors. The first few years were very hard because we were the first ones to do it, right? And so there was like this pushback saying, why are you showing me all this, right? Because 95% of them were positive, but 5% showed what they could improve. And the improvement was usually around, could have, like you called out, right? The environment could have been better. It was too noisy. It was, these small things could have been better. And there were other things also. But getting that data to the doctor, we have done analysis. We have seen year on year how this feedback has completely changed. How things that people used to complain about 10 years back are no longer even relevant today. Like, just to give you an example, there were a couple of doctors who, because of their stress levels and because of so many things they manage, sometimes would be rude to patients. And they were not knowing that they were actually rude, but they were coming across that way because patients never go back to their doctor and tell them that you were rude, right? But through this feedback, they would share that. It could be anonymous, it could be, and they found a mechanism to pass that feedback back. And maybe the team that the doctor had was not again strong enough to pass on this feedback earlier, but we were just showing them a dashboard where it would, on real time, they would see the feedback. And before publishing, we would show it to them, right? That, hey, this is the feedback. Would you have any comments? And if they had anything, we would publish it with it. And so this kind of data really helps the doctors understand where are they where could there be areas of improvement? Because everybody wants to improve,
Yeah.
and that's how they grow. And so, you're already doing well. Every doctor is doing well, but how can you focus on the things that you personally need to change, and you can understand that better? So it starts with data, and then that data through a system will allow you to understand which processes to improve, which areas to improve, and then you can have people to solve that.
This seems like an expensive affair, right? Because building these systems, first of all, data collection, the analytics, and then the people around it to be able to deliver the improved experience or outcome. Seems like you'll have to put, as a doctor, more money into it, which potentially means that in the initial part of making this shift, you are actually sort of making much lesser than you would earlier, and only over time it sort of results into better outcomes.
I don't think so. At least when we look at our data about why do doctors adopt technology or do not adopt technology, cost is not a factor.
Okay.
It's usually mindset, which is, and do I have the need? Do I understand the benefits? And two is time, right? That do I have the time to involve myself, to take myself out of. So it's and being in India, India is the capital for technology. Technology is the
Yes.
and just to give some more numbers, the amount of money spent by in the US on technology is usually around 5 to 10% of the revenue is spent on technology.
In which in
healthcare. In healthcare,
okay.
around 5%. Some go up to 10.5. In India, if you take the P&Ls of all public listed companies and look at how much are they spending on technology, you'll be shocked. It's less than 1%. Okay,
Wow.
and if you go to other, it's not just in the large public ones, but across this thing, less than 1% of the revenue goes into IT and or picking up tools, any tool, right? And I think that's where there's an opportunity. Of course, I might sound biased because I come from that domain of IT, but I think that it can give a multifold return.
Yeah.
If understood well how to use, and if implemented well how to use, it can give a multifold return. And that's where I think that there's a mindset that you need data.
Yeah.
Now, that data could be from any system, but being data oriented is something that any business will see itself as a strength of theirs.
Yeah.
And that's one area where healthcare is, they measure a lot of data around health outcome. I mean, clinical outcomes, like when a hospital will measure how many times has the patient come back, what's the length of stay. But treatment outcomes, that is what happened after 6 months, what happened after 12 months, that longitudinal data and more analysis on that is still starting off now. It's beginning to start.
And when I was, reading about the health tech ecosystem, it seems like over the next few years, it'll be a $50 billion market. There are, at the face of it, there's enough to prove that this is a very, very large opportunity. And yet, it's not progressed at the pace at which it probably should have. What caused this delay, Shashank? Because this 1% versus 6 to 7% in terms of spends, is it a function of our mindset, or is it that the fundamental tools around this were not built, like the data systems were not there, Ayushman Bharat has only just started happening? What were some of the issues?
See, I think this was, I would say, expected. Some of it is unexpected, some of it is expected. I'm taking the whole health tech ecosystem, primarily because you look at healthcare. If healthcare is the last to adopt technology.
Okay,
and that is worldwide. Even though US is where it is, it's because it's taken time, and we are probably a few decades behind, but we'll catch up. But worldwide, health is the last to adopt technology. And the reason for it is because healthcare runs on a single thing that's most important, that's trust. Trust is the most important thing in healthcare. Efficiency is not, right? That's why people love to wait for 3 hours for a good doctor than get the next 1 minute available doctor, right? People don't mind spending a little bit more on healthcare versus finding a discount coupon for a doctor, right? So healthcare works differently because it works on trust, and trust is something that you can't replicate through technology, overnight. It takes time. So trust as a fundamental concept takes time to build and decades to build. So doctors do that, by word of mouth. Right? They treat the patient spreads good word, and etc. So then tools and technology and health tech has to factor in two things. A, how do I build products and services that can understand this concept of trust and amplify it, incorporate and amplify it. And second, factor in the time it will take to capture this trust and then amplify it, right? That's why the best hospital usually is the oldest hospital, right? Or the one that has tenured. The newest shiny building next door is not the one that you will step into, versus you'll do the complete reverse in other industries, where you'll say, hey, there's this really great place for entertainment or a very good new restaurant that's opened up.
Yeah.
But when it comes to healthcare, trust is more important, right? And so that's why, two factors. One, build products and services that encapsulate this trust. B, factor in the time it will take. It will take decades.
Yeah.
But then the good news is that those are also moats.
Yes.
Which means that, as they say, a doctor, as he ages, earning capacity only increases.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how even brands in healthcare work. A Dettol is a 150-year-old brand. Like all the brands around us which are in healthcare are decades old. Right? Are like people don't even realize it, are decades old. Like even MRI. You think about MRI. Which year do you think MRI was first came into being?
1940s, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's that old, right? I mean, it's actually 1980s, but it's still 40 years. The latest technology we use today in diagnostics, which is imaging technology, which is CT, and are like 40 years old.
Yeah.
Right? But your UPI is how old?
Yeah.
How old is even credit cards?
Yes.
So finance and others adopt technology faster. There are other industries that adopt later. Last is healthcare.
Yeah.
But it's also more sticky. Right, and that's and so there are a lot of good things about it. That it's recession proof, it is evergreen, all of those things. But it's also last of technology. So I think health tech has a role to play. I personally believe, and you're putting a paper out on this also, that health tech adopts a branch of science, which is data science, computer science, which I think will enhance health outcomes for the entire world. And this is the century in which it will happen. There's no doubt about it. It's just going to take time. So if you're going to apply the same timelines of other industries on health, that's being unreasonable.
I guess so much of what you say is very familiar when it comes to wealth management also, right? There's so much of that interpersonal understanding and the reluctance, therefore, to adopt to technology where, a human being can do it.
Well, we were surprised when we did analysis, funnily enough, wealth advisors were similar to doctors because it's all about trust.
Yeah.
Right. And because there's a lot to lose.
Yeah.
Right. There is, the phrase we constantly heard in our consumer research was risk kyun lena hai. Right. Risk nahi lena hai. Right. Because this is something that, is going to determine your life. So it's funny that, we have a similar problem.
No, and, to that end, the businesses, therefore, and we were speaking briefly before we started, have generally longer gestation in this space. And yet, when you talk about the lack of adoption of technology, there seems to be this whole thought process around using data science better. When I was talking to a health tech entrepreneur in the US, and he was telling me about so many of these creative ways data is being used, where reports are being scanned, doctors are getting inputs ahead of time before the patient even sometimes walks in. What is happening on that side? And the next phase of that is probably artificial intelligence. How is that likely to impact the doctor business or the profession of medicine?
Yeah, if you asked me 16 years back when I'm my third year of college of engineering, and that I'll be doing what I'm doing 16 years later, I'd be like, the odds are very less and that won't happen. But if you told me that I would enjoy it more now than before, I would be like, that's just, a fairy tale, right? And I, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for me, it's true. Right? I've never been more excited about the role technology and data can play in healthcare than ever before. And thanks to whoever wrote that paper in Google on attention is all you need, and whoever at Nvidia who built those H100s, and whoever in OpenAI who figured out how all this can be put together to create LLMs. Oh man, they've changed the world. Right? And it was beginning to get a little stale, I'll be honest. I know we started off in 2008 when we built India's first, and even sometimes I think it's also the world's first online software for doctors, right? We were online in 2008. So we built SaaS in 2008.
Wow.
And then in 2012, we built the first doctor discovery platform, right? And then in 2000 and I think few years later, we built the first mobile app, right? And so after mobile, there was really nothing major tectonically happened, right? There was internet where SaaS came in, then there was internet penetration through mobile, and then there were mobile apps through Play stores like Apple stores. But after that, and then the last 2 years, and especially last year, it's unbelievable, and
the pace of change is incredibly high now.
Yeah, but I'm just being very specific about this innovation, right? And what this innovation can do for healthcare is phenomenal. And honestly, I used to hear podcasts about this. I used to read headlines about this. I'm like, chalo, one more some kind of frenzy and media frenzy, etc. But now I'm using it on a daily basis. I'm not talking about using ChatGPT for my personal or professional use, but I'm talking about using that data science or rather those models in our products and services, and I'm truly blown away.
Give me an instance of like some of the surprising stuff.
I'm trying to not reveal too much because I need to keep some As you can see, I think I'll give you an example. We did this. A human brain can only consume so many papers. Let's take a doctor, and doctor has studied X number of books and has passed, NEET, today's NEET exam, and then goes on to do NEET PG. Then meets bunch of patients, gets those knowledge, and then throughout his years of experience, each year, reads up on CME programs, attends CME programs, reads up on journals, does all of this.
Sure.
And he accumulates knowledge, right? Now, that same knowledge can be accumulated within 3 months.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, what I'm talking about doesn't encapsulate the surgical part yet, but just the physician portion, which is what I spoke about, like understanding it's there now. The technology to understand data and convert it into intelligence is here. It's not in the future. So it's not, while this word of artificial intelligence is, intelligence is, of different IQ levels, but the basic knowledge is there now.
Yeah.
And it's getting better at an incredible pace. And just to give you, the number of journals released each year is at least 1,000 times more than the amount of journals a person can read and understand. So by default, the knowledge that a doctor needs to have is being outpaced by the supply of knowledge by a ratio of 1:1,000. Because you can't read everything. So you're already...
So this is creating a way to funnel it and like analyze it, synthesize
and
it.
all of it, right? So I feel the closest I can get to, and this is just something I'm just thinking of right now, is that what quant did in trading, for example.
Yes.
And it's going to get smarter now, I'm sure, is something that's going to enter into healthcare now, where through data, we can for the first time show much better health outcomes. And I've told you offline about some of the results we have seen in our lab of this product that we are building and its efficacy. It's truly outstanding. It's something that I've never seen, and we are now putting some papers together, which hopefully will get peer reviewed and we'll publish them on how factually we are able to correlate data science and its impact on health outcomes. It is, so because one good thing about healthcare is that nobody wants to take any risk, right from the patient or even doctors. So they don't want to use anything that is not peer reviewed and doesn't have. So every product that they prescribe or test they prescribe has been peer reviewed, and then they have the confidence that I can now trust this review, right? They believe deeply in science. So we want to use the same methodology to share with them how data science can really impact health outcomes, clinical outcomes, how clinical outcomes can be better off with computer science and data science. And when that empirical data, which we already have and we are now in the process of publishing, it'll then become crystal clear on this being true science leading to clinical outcomes, not just convenience and superficial impact on consumers, but actual health outcome impact on consumers. And I think it's only going to get better. So 16 years into the space, and I'm extremely excited about next 4 to 5 years what we can build. It's some absolutely kick-ass products are going to get built. Some very fundamental changes are going to happen in the way people are going to receive healthcare. There is absolutely no way that the person, I see that in after a few years, will not be able to get the best healthcare advice in any language they want anywhere in the world at a tip of their fingertip. And I'll be surprised if the clinical outcomes don't significantly improve by providing co-pilots to doctors and by providing access to AI doctors to patients. I don't see how that's not going to happen in the next 5 years. So I'm in probably one of the best seats. So I'm very grateful that it's happened now and I'm here.
It's exciting, and the kind of impact that you are creating is, I think, fantastic. Shashank, it's great for, I guess, a patient to have all of this available, and therefore they will heal faster, probably have more certainty of healing, etc. But now when you look at it from a doctor's perspective, somebody, let's say, who has 15-20 years ahead of them in their career, we are saying that they need to be good doctors. They also need to be good at understanding commercials. They need to be good at interacting with patients. And now we are saying they also need to be good at adopting to technology in a way that they can deliver better outcomes. Now, it seems like very intimidating for somebody who's been around for a while to figure out how to consume all of this change that is happening. So what's your advice to doctors on how to adopt some of these new technologies?
I mean, if you look at the people who become doctors, they're some of the smartest people in the country.
Sure.
Right? You look at the ratio of seats to the scores, and you're talking to some of the smartest people in the country. So I don't think there's any, I'm sure they'll pick up this and more as long as they believe that it is going to be important. I'm pretty sure that they'll pick this and more. I know most of the best hospitals are run by doctors. They are they're phenomenal at picking up all the different components and running with it. And like any person, take an example of me, for example. I just knew computer science when I graduated. Then I had to adopt sales skills when I started a business, started a startup. Then I had to adopt commercial sense when I started getting investors. Then I had to adopt HR skills when I started adding team members. I needed to adopt finance skills when I started I need to have good knowledge of everything to grow. And I think that's the innate evolution of humans, that we are able to build tools and services for each other that make it easier for each other to grow. And each generation of a generation, we pass on that knowledge and we build tools for the next generation to make it easier. And that's what, so I don't see it as a challenge. I just see that the people who adopt first and faster, get ahead. And the ones who are later, then, will also go forward, but it'll be at a slower pace, and they might feel a sense of being left behind. But I think it's just about investing that time and curiosity to learn, and this is what the world needs. And so the people who do it will move forward, and those who won't will step back. I don't think it's intimidating. I don't think it's more complex than biology. At least for me, I wasn't one of the best biology students. So I think they will quite easily move forward. And the best thing about healthcare is there's no limit. There is no limit set that people have to live to 80 or 90 or 100 or 110. So this job is the best job because it has an infinite horizon. Right? And today they're talking about the first person who live up to 150 years has been born. So you're in the best business that you can be in because there's no limit, right? And unlike wealth where you can say, okay, you know what, itna kafi hai. I've never heard of somebody who says, you know what, 60 kafi hai, right? I think if they are in good health, everybody wants to live and experience this world. And if Elon Musk is successful, more worlds in this lifetime. So we're in the best business, and tools can only help us get better at what patients want. And patients want to live healthy lives for a very long time. So I'm sure people will pick up the skills required to deliver that.
No, when you were saying this, better healthcare is actually putting more pressure on wealth management, because folks will live longer, the money will have to last longer, and therefore the portfolio needs to do better than before.
Of course, I'm sure you'll figure that out. That sounds easier than making people live longer.
I'm sure. That's for sure. Your own personal journey has been fascinating. You talked about how you learned different things at different points of time, but sometimes we forget that you were a founder right out of college, and in an area which is defined by trust. And I can't even imagine how doctors would engage with a founder right out of college who's trying to tell them how they can do their job better because of tooling and so on. How was that initial experience of setting up?
Yeah, I mean, I had to pretend a lot. So I remember, I was in college when I started. I was in my final year, and I used to take my father's shirts, which are outsized shirts. I was trying to grow facial hair. I was trying to look older. And then I would borrow my friend's laptop because I didn't have a laptop. And then I would borrow all of this. And the only thing I had was a two-wheeler, which my parents had, gratefully given to me. So I had that one thing. And then I would take that and go off, and I would print a card which would say I'm the sales executive, right? And I would pretend I'm working for this, big company which is very reliable.
CEO and founder, that wouldn't
work. They're like, CEO and founder is this, then company to gaya, right? So I would have a card. I would have two cards, right? I would have one card which is CEO and founder, one card which is sales executive. And sales executive, I would speak very highly of my management. Right? I was like, management, badhiya hai. I never say anything wrong. Like, I never say that there's somebody else.
Sure.
And if they figured it out, then I would, of course, tell them. They really asked 3-4 levels. They would definitely tell them. And then if the next meeting was investor meeting, I would give the CEO founder card. If the next meeting was the same, I would give the sales executive card. But for me, most importantly was, in college, I was not really looking to start a company per se. I was trying to solve problems. I was trying to solve, for some reason, I just wanted to use my computer science skills to solve a problem. And I was just trying to find who would, engage with me. And doctors did, and they had problems. They had problems in keeping track of their patients. They had problems in, like you called out, in sending reminders to the patients about their appointments. Patients were missing their appointments. They had problems with keeping track of their patients' health records. They had challenge in understanding their own time and where they will be, what they will be. So I saw an opportunity there, and I saw an opportunity in how patients' lives can be improved. If the doctor were to adopt this, the patient's life would improve. I mean, I would want my doctor to use the tools that I'm using so that he would treat me better. So I saw a lot of synergy there, and it just kept going on from there, solving one problem to the next, to the next, to the next, and it was kind of a rabbit hole that I got into. I would say that when I was in college, it was much more easier because I had no, there was really no. I knew that if it did not work out, I'll always get a job. That's not a challenge. But there was no dependencies. So even if the startup was generating a few lakh rupees, it's great. So we had very little to lose. I remember also going to business plan competition. That was my fundraise, right? I would go to business plan competition, submit my actual business as a business plan, and then go tell them that. And then I would get the third prize. I'd be like, the first two are not even,
a business. I'm running this.
I'm actually running a business. And you'd be surprised how much of my initial capital came from business plan competitions.
Wow.
Only time I went to MBA colleges was to present business plan competitions because they used to have the business plan competition. And so the weirdest moment used to be when they would, I would submit my business plan and I would get shortlisted in the top 5. And then they would come and pick us up, right? The students would come. And they would be like, you are the one? And yes, I'm the one. And because I would be younger than them. I would be younger than the people, conducting the event. And they would have to call me sir, which was also very weird, right? And then I would win the business plan competition. Some of them, not all of them. I think I am B1. I did not win.
No, you shouldn't hold that against us.
I should go and check up on my records. I won a couple. I think in Delhi I won one or two. So anyways, so we won those competitions, and that became capital for us, because they would give you 50,000 rupees for a business plan competition.
Yeah.
So
and which point did you realize that this is now a serious thing that's happening? Because you said there was a plan B, in the sense if it doesn't work out, you'll go and get a job. But at some point you felt, okay, now this looks like a real company happening. What were some of the metrics or some of the indicators that you felt like now Practo can be a large business?
I don't think that, and I think at the starting it was not about will be a large business. And I was 21. We were in 2008 after the meltdown, financial global meltdown. Lehman Brothers had gone out. People were giving pin slips everywhere, and I had not sat for my college placements. So I decided very heroically that I'll not sit for it. I don't want to have a plan B, because if you have a plan B, there's no plan A.
Sure.
Then after 6 months of all companies coming and going, and all my friends being placed, and everybody in my batch being placed, and going off to Goa and other places to party, I was sitting in Bangalore trying to sell this product to doctors. And then after 6 months, I thought, what's the harm? So I went to college. I took the first overnight bus to college. I landed up, whichever was the first company that came in, I sat for it. Luckily, I got through. Evening bus I took, I came back. So I had that option after 6 months of placement. So luckily that company came. But what gave me confidence was after the first year, just as I was going to join that company, sitting and I was thinking that, hey, I really enjoy this, right? There's a lot of hard work, and I used to see my seniors, and we used to go meet them, and everybody would come to this Pico's in MG Road, right? And they would always complain about their jobs, right? They'll say, ye kharab hai, wo ho raha hai. I was like, yaar, agar yehi karna hai, so this, what I'm doing itself sounds not too bad. Yes, it doesn't earn money, but I don't have too much I'm just coming out of college, right? So I don't have, too many ambitions. Only thing I had to do was switch off Facebook, switch off all these places which would show how others are doing, and just focus on what I'm doing. And I just genuinely enjoyed what we were doing. I was learning new things while coding. I was learning new things while selling, and doctors really. And the one thing I remember, a couple of doctors, when I sold them the product in my final year, told me, and I remember the two doctors who told me that, and this one dentist, he told me that, Shashank, you're too smart for this. I've seen many come before you, and they've all, gone away. They've taken my money and ran away. I'm sure you're one of them. You'll be like that, because...
And yet he gave you money.
Yet he gave me the money, right? And that's the large-heartedness of doctors. Not just one, 3 of them. They said, I have bought 5 softwares before you. They've all come and gone away. They've all sold me this pitch and gone away. You are smart. You'll go to the US. It's 2008. You'll clearly go to the US. You're studying from a good institute, so you'll definitely do your master's or whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to go away. Then actually some of them, and I'll still pay you money, some of them said you should go away, right? Don't do this. Some of them even called me to the side. Dr. Jagdish C, I remember, he called me to the side and he said that, see, I have paid you for a year. You've done this for a year now. Don't do this. You're too good a person, right? Go, because this is not a good business, right? And so that was also in the back of my mind, right? And I was like, hey, they've trusted me, right? And by that time we had 100 doctors, right, who were using our software. And I was having fun learning. So I was like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Let me keep pushing. And there were hard times. There were really hard times. Like, this is before any funding, right? And this is when 2009, startups not even a word, right? It was... money would be given to a large established people, and we were 22-year-olds. So I had no hope, but I was just enjoying myself, and I was doing it just from that standpoint, never really thinking it'll become big or whether it'll become. I just genuinely enjoyed meeting doctors, solving their problems, building a good product, getting good feedback, solving the patient's problem. I felt there was meaning in that, and naturally what happens, right? And so there was no hope that, and I also used to meet investors, which would be even more demotivating because they were like, what is TAM? I say, what is TAM? I was like, you're not even on MBA. I'm like, no, I'm not an MBA. So they're like, you should know your TAM. Literally, you've seen Silicon Valley or you've seen these sitcoms. It literally, used to be like that, where I would be like buzzer, these buzzwords be thrown at me, and I would feel very awkward. I was like, यार नहीं चाहिए तुम्हारा पैसे, मैं मतलब बेचता हूँ, मैं बेच के पैसे बना लेता हूँ. So we got about 1,000 customers or something like that without a single investor. So we would have continued, and curiosity was what's driving us. It wasn't any large outcome or let's build a large company. It was just curiosity.
The other fascinating thing is that given how much capital it takes to build trust, for you to now turn probably India's first profitable health tech company, right? And certainly in the VC funded ecosystem. What are some of the learnings from that particular journey? That what is it that worked at a certain point of time? Was the capex sort of played out and therefore the profitability came, or some optimization on marketing, etc.?
Yeah, there are two ways to see this. Yes, we are one of the first few to turn profitable in the health tech space, and we want to do to show that health tech can be profitable. It can grow and be profitable at an all the way down to the EBITDA level and cash flow level. But I don't think, I think I could have done a much better job, for sure. I think I ended up raising much more than I needed. But all this comes in hindsight.
Sure.
I made a bunch of mistakes, and I think my capital efficiency, before 2018 was like, I wasted 80%. And after 2018, because I wasted 80%, I've been like 100%, right? After 2018, or maybe 95% plus, right? The efficiency of use of capital. Wastage has been, maybe 5% or so. But that, still hurts me that I could have done a better job between the 2016 and 18 period. And those learnings are what I take forward, right? I have failed in so many ways that, I find that failure is a learning you've done once. It's a failure if you do it twice.
Yeah.
Right. So luckily, I feel I've not repeated a failure or a learning twice. But yeah, I've had those learnings, and so those learnings have been helpful. So I feel even those companies today which are going through a similar phase where they might have raised a lot of capital and they are a little ahead, on their valuation. I think there's hope, right? I think I have been there. I have had that in 2017 and 18, where there was just too much capital that I had raised. Valuations were high. But then if you put your head down and focus on what is truly worthwhile, you can turn the company profitable. I mean, you need to have the right products and services for which. So the learning for me was that, perseverance is a very big component of it. Don't get distracted. Even during 2009-10, I would not get distracted by Facebook or any of these tools. Same thing in 2018-19. Cut out all the noise from outside. There'll be a lot of noise.
Yeah.
People will push you up, and then they'll pull you down, and they'll push you up again.
Put you on magazine covers and all of that. Yeah.
So those are all need to be distant from.
Sure.
And then I think health tech is one of my. I feel that where else you get a sector where you can make an impact on your family members and earn money from it. Right? I mean,
very few sectors allow for that.
Yeah, you're literally increasing the lifespan of your family members.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't want their parents to live longer, your grandparents to live longer, your children to live longer, your spare friends to live longer, and you're doing that on a day-to-day basis, and you're also creating value for all the shareholders. So it's an absolutely brilliant space. I think it just takes more time. So if you thought that a startup takes 5-10 years, this one takes 15, 20, 25 years. But the good news is that the extra 10 years you need to put in, because it gives you some extra. It gives you a lot of meaning and value.
Yeah, and creates moats, like you earlier said.
Yeah.
It's been a fantastic journey. I was reading your new letter, and it's very well written, I must say. It's covered like how medicine has evolved over a period of time. You have over 2 lakh doctors, crores of patients, God knows how many consultations. Shashank, it's been fantastic seeing the journey from the outside. And I remember meeting many years ago and being fascinated by what you're building and continue to be. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me over.